Welcome to Crying Out Cloud, the podcast that will make you laugh, cry, and reconsider all of your cloud security fears. I'm Eden, and I'm here with my amazing co-host, Amitai.
Hello.
And today we have a very special guest, Karim El-Melhaoui, and he is a principal security architect and partner at O3 Cyber. He serves as a board member at Cloud Security Alliance Norway and previously worked at Norges Bank Investment Management, focused on cyber resilience. He develops open source cloud security tools, is an accomplished public speaker, and has and continues to contribute to advancing and improving security standards and practices in the cloud and beyond. Welcome, Kareem.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Where are you calling us from?
I'm in Oslo, Norway right now.
So to kick it off, we have this section called Cloud Confessions. So everyone gets to know our guest. Are you down for a round of speed questions?
Sure, let's go for it.
So first question is, how many hours of sun are you going to get today?
I think about 5 hours, if I'm not mistaken.
Does that mean you take vitamin D on the side?
I did take my vitamin D this morning.
Solid.
When you're doing your hiking or when you're working, what sort of music do you like to listen to?
I use this app called Brain FM, which is more like kind of audio waves, and I feel like it really allows me to focus. And it has all kinds of music, so there's like some is just like brain waves or whatever you call it, like music to make you focus, but they also have like some classical music, which I like listening to. And I can sometimes like just play some Luciano Pavarotti or something that's more like relaxing.
So we have a playlist we put out every once in a while called the Cloud Hacking Playlist. So if you have any recommendations for us and things we should add to there, whether it's from your brain application or from anything else you like to listen to, please let us know.
Yeah, definitely.
You also have your own podcast, the O3C Cybersecurity podcast. We didn't quite understand a lot of it because it's not in English. But can you tell us what you enjoy about doing the podcast?
So the podcast happens to be in Norwegian. We figured if we have it in Norwegian, people will feel like it's more familiar listening to, especially if you're Norwegian, you're used to most of the podcasts being English. And it started out we started like season 1, let's just go through like some different topics and have like an open discussion on like all the CIS controls, and like we'll just go through them and have discussion on how we interpret those and how we can easily implement those for like small companies. And then we figured like, let's make this podcast a bit more welcoming. So we started doing what you guys are doing, having guests, and the guests started sharing their topics on like what they've been doing. So we've had like people talking about how they've done cloud security in a large financial institution, or how they're doing security champions across an organization. So it's really just a fun side project that we enjoy doing.
Have you met any people who were like stars you wanted to meet through the podcast?
But we did have the general manager of the Norwegian cyber defense in a podcast episode. That was really nice. We also had Nikolai Tangen, who runs his own podcast, In Good Company, and I think that's one of the biggest business podcasts in the world. So that was also really cool.
Awesome.
Can you tell us what pulled you into the world of like cloud security and what got you hooked?
So technically, I actually started prior to finance in outsourcing, where we were like building this private cloud. And I did that for 5 years, where we were providing like private cloud, virtual machines and everything with services on top, which kind of looked like cloud. Like this was before OneDrive was possible to use, and there weren't any good competitors, and Dropbox was just off the table at that point. And we built like a sync service where users could synchronize their personal files as part of the private cloud. And we kept building those kind of services and deliver it as a managed cloud service. So that was kind of my first impression of the cloud, but as a private cloud. And I didn't really think about the cloud back then. And then I got into finance, where I started working for Norges Bank Investment Management. They'd set a really high, ambitious goal about like, we're going to do everything in the cloud. Like we're going to lose touch with the ground, as we called it, and go full into the cloud. And that's where I realized I needed to really learn cloud security. And I'd been working with Azure for a few years and like doing as a Microsoft certified trainer. I've been lecturing at Microsoft Azure classes. But then we were going towards AWS, and I'd only heard about AWS at that point, so I wasn't sure if I was going to thrive in the job. Like, I had to learn a complete new skill set. But I think going from knowing Microsoft Azure to having to learn AWS made me learn more about cloud as a whole and cloud security rather than just learning a single technology, which is what I'd essentially learned by only knowing Azure.
So, what would you say you find interesting about working in cloud security within finance?
So right now I'm consulting for a lot of different companies, but finance has been like my main client since we started O3 Cyber. What I like about finance is usually they have larger teams. So it's like you have a team that's focusing on threat detection and incident response. You have another team that's focusing on the compliance, risk, governance. And you can work with the different functions. And what's also nice about working with finance, especially in Norway, like the financial institutions aren't that big if you compare it to the US. So you can actually make an impact. You can like make a noticeable difference by putting in an effort and see how that basically makes the bank harder to break, which is really cool.
So, I guess you started off working like within companies, and now you work with companies, right?
Exactly, yeah.
If you were a vulnerability, what kind would you be?
Probably something persistent.
I like that.
Like a cron job injection or something. I don't know.
Exactly.
All right. You're past this part. Let's jump into the real questions. At O3 Cyber, where you're a principal security architect and partner, it started as a community project. Can you tell us a little bit about the history there, like how it started, how it evolved, and what you do today?
So Olav, who's my co-founder and other partner in O3 Cyber, we'd been. I was living in New York at the time, and he was living here in Oslo. It was COVID lockdown. We were bored. Let's do a podcast. So we were using like the Riverside platform, doing a remote podcast, and we were going through the different podcast episodes, and we figured we got a big following eventually. So we had, I think, a few hundred followers on Spotify, and it like people kept talking to us about the podcast. I guess people were looking for new entertainment sources because of COVID and lockdowns. And through COVID, we kind of kept the momentum going with the podcast and started talking to people. We did live podcasts at conferences eventually as well, and decided let's use the fun we're having working together and just start a company together. And when we decided to found the company, we also brought on our third partner, Håkon, who was working with me in Norges Bank Investment Management as well. And he's been doing some episodes lately as well. And we figured let's have a community-focused company where we continue to give back to the community because we feel like we're part of the community. We do events like our annual Cloud Security Day. We try to do research and publish research, though, although not at the cadence that you guys are able to as WIS. But we still do our research. We still give out our projects and we do our talks. And that's why we're like a community-first company.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought that starting a company from a podcast would be the directionality of that. Like, I think a lot of people start podcasts for companies, like the way that we're doing. I don't think I'd have met Eden unless we were both working at Wiz.
Exactly, and I think that was a lot of thanks to Olav because he's really good at getting to know people. So we met through like an information exchange at work where we didn't really know each other from before. He was working for a huge pharmaceutical company, and I was working at the FSI. And he came by to just learn how we've moved to the cloud, and we just got to know each other, and we stayed in touch, and from there launched a podcast, which became the company. So.
And today you guys do like security assessments in a more consulting nature. Like how do you approach these? How does it work?
We are a cloud security company, as we like to say. We are consultants primarily, and we engage with clients on different topics. So we have our assessment offering, which you could say has some resemblance to what WIS does. It gives you kind of digital visibility of the cloud, although our process is a lot more manual. So it's actual manual labor compared to WIS that's able to do it more automatically. But our assessment kind of gets the API access to a cloud environment. We go into detail. We turn every stone, and we look for configuration findings or other stuff that could potentially be abused. And we also work with clients on other engagements, such as transformation, or I recently had a company that's going to scale and needed to do threat detection, for instance, from scratch in Google Cloud. And we built that together with the client, working alongside their resources, and built all the processes first and then did the technical implementations. So we're kind of like a Swiss Army knife when it comes to cloud security.
In another note, having worked in both, you worked in New York for a period and in Oslo, both in kind of this security-minded role in this financial institution. How do you see, and also from your consulting work, the differences in cloud security approaches between the US and European financial institutions, especially considering like different regulatory environments and cultures?
This one might come off wrong, but what I see is like the maturity is much higher in terms of the competence level in the US compared to Europe. So one of the things I wanted when I moved back to Norway was to kind of take that competence and the international community or the US community and bring that knowledge back to Norway and like elevate the level of cloud security understanding in Europe as well, or at least for the Nordics where I can make an impact myself. Now, when it comes to like more of the organizational aspects as well, I think the benefits of organizations generally being smaller in Europe and especially in the Nordics is that you have like people have more like a Swiss Army knife role, like rather than being hired like as a detection engineer and only doing detection engineering, you can be like a security architect, you can be an instant responder, and you can do detection engineering. So you're way more multidisciplinary, allowing you to have a broader impact in an organization, and also you might even have a good overview of everything that's happening in the organization. Or, well, you can never have a full overview, but you can at least have a better understanding of what's going on in the organization.
Like being smaller, sort of you have to sort of behave more like a startup, I guess. Like where every employee is like is an army, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison, actually.
And I wanted to ask, we were on the board of the Forward CloudSec CFP this year. So I was wondering if like the fact that it's taking place in Europe should be a factor, right? Like beyond inviting European presenters, like maybe the topics should have been different as well. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I'm also part of the organizing committee, and this is one of the things we're discussing now. How can we make it more European, the European part of the Forward CloudSec? And I think there are, like, if you think about finance, for instance, we have the Digital Operations Resiliency Act, which is only applicable to European financial institutions. And I think that one matters if you're in the cloud as well. You need to like find out what's the best approach for this in the cloud and how can you do cloud security around that. Then there's also the new NIS2 standard that's coming out in most of Europe now as well for critical institutions. And there might be aspects of that as well that will apply to cloud. And I think those are topics that should be covered in Forward CloudSec as well, for the relevant audience.
So if anyone's listening and wants to submit the CFP for the European version, then take that into consideration, I think.
Definitely, and the European version is still in the early days of planning, but we're looking for venues, so it's going to be another year of Forward CloudSec in Europe as well.
It's good to hear.
But yeah, just to double down on that, I feel like as we see the trends of the world, we're going to see that even more so that in like different regions of the world, they're just going to be different expectations and different standards that are applied to them as our governments go in wildly different directions.
Are there things that companies in the finance sector need to think about that other companies don't need to think about? Like, I'd guess that it would be a lot stricter in terms of like privacy protection, things like that.
Definitely. So it's regulation. That's a huge factor. Regulation and reporting. And then I also think when it comes to risks, like they're working with risks where financial, like it's easier to quantify the operational risks in finance because you have like an idea of what kind of losses you're dealing with. While cyber risk is a lot harder to work with because there's way more uncertainties as well. So I often see in finance they try to apply the operational risk framework to the cyber risk, and it kind of has some sort of a conflict as well, which is a challenge.
I guess there's a lot of potential for dedicated, I guess, frameworks for configuration rules and things like that you could check like as a checklist for those kind of companies.
Yeah, I think the challenge right now is that there are so many frameworks, so there's a lot to choose from.
It's like the XKCD comic with the we need another framework.
Exactly, but I do see a good adoption of the NIST cybersecurity framework here in Norway, actually, which is I think it's a quite useful framework to manage your cyber risk and track your capabilities.
I think one of the challenges we often run into at Wiz, I'm sure it's the same for security assessments, is translating the frameworks into something that's easy to check, like to automate and make it actionable. Like to take, so it's not just the checklist, like you can take a certain aspect of the framework and say like this is more important than another aspect, and this is what you should prioritize first. I think that's often a challenge we run into.
So one thing is like the frameworks that are different, difficult, and then there's also like there are different, like here's a target reference architecture for being compliant with this, but like there are still more ways to do the target reference architecture than the one, for instance, the cloud provider gives you. So you should still question whether there's better ways to solve the same issue rather than just following what's being said by the cloud provider in most cases.
Right. So I guess that like sort of personal customization is also part of like a big part of what you do when you work with companies.
So what we do is often like help them build cloud platforms or reinforce their cloud platforms. So, and I think where we're seeing a lot of interesting stuff lately is like their CI/CD, and we're seeing OpenID Connect being a commonly misconfigured vector in many environments where they don't really realize the potential damage that could occur as a result of it.
Yeah, that feels like it's going to be an issue for a while. Like it feels like that's an area where people can make a lot of mistakes very easily, and it's too easy to make them, and there's no real good standardization there.
Yeah, I think as adoption of OIDC is growing, we will continue to see a rise of misconfigurations as well.
I think we also wanted to talk about another piece of research that you did about strategies for securing infrastructure as code.
I worked with some organizations that have been that have gone to the cloud, and they're like, okay, we're doing everything infrastructure as code, which
sounds good. That sounds
exactly
good.
Great approach. You're doing it right, but then when you're kind of looking down to it, so like, okay, how like you're doing least privilege as well. That's great. There's no people with permanent access. You can request just-in-time access. Then you look at their code repositories and like, but hey, there's no branch protection on this GitHub repo, and I can run the GitHub action CI pipeline by having a pull request. Like, there's kind of a disconnect there between what you're saying, your intention, and how things are configured. So we started to do some research into this, like looking at our clients, like how can we help them better configure their continuous integration for cloud environments. And what I did at a client was basically they were going to use GitHub from start. So we figured, okay, how are we going to configure GitHub? We need to make sure all our repos that are used for cloud integration has branch protection, for instance, no administrators. So we create the small Python client just to configure all repositories, put that into a pipeline, and then we could have self-service changes with peer review of like granting access to different repos. We eliminated the need of having like people that are admin on repositories, for instance. Because if you're an admin on a repository, you can effectively just bypass the branch protection, and then you're admin in the cloud environment, which we wanted to avoid.
Is that, I think you released a tool called RepoMan, right? A while ago? Is that like the ultimate evolution of that Python script?
It is, and I'd say like RepoMan is kind of like more of a proof of concept. So what we often do when we release tools is more like giving out research previews. So we're showing like this is how we solve the problem. This is how you can do it yourself. But since we're a small consultancy, we don't have the capacity to maintain tools over time. And we also don't have the capacity to kind of give you a full-fledged tool. So we're really focusing on giving out tools that are in the research preview state, like here's how you can do it, and here's an example, and here's a tool to get you started doing this.
It's a great name also.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of short for Repo Manager, and then I'm like, okay, why not just call it Repo Man? Yeah.
I like it. Are you guys working on any other open source tools at the moment, or do you have like a calling or a vision of what should be built next?
Yeah, we have a research preview that's coming out in a month for some code-to-code stuff. And I'm kind of hoping you guys will pick that up and bake it into the Wiz product as well. Because I think what we're going to do there is really cool. And it's going to be really tangible for you guys to embed that into a product as well. So I'll
I'm
keep you
curious
guys
now.
posted.
Oh, yeah, you're leaving us on the edge of our seats.
Yeah.
Kareem, thank you for joining us. It has been a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you. I love being here. Really great to meet you guys.
Yeah, and it's super cool the work you're doing. And if someone wants to learn more about what you guys are doing, where can they find out?
Yeah, so o3c.no or Kareem at o3c.no is where you can reach me. And I'm also going to be in the Cloud Security Forum Slack or on LinkedIn.
Amazing.
So guys, I'm going to do the outro in Norwegian now. Om du likte showet, så husk å subscribe og dele linken til podcasten, men ikke del tilgangsnøklene til skyen din. Og som alltid, hvis skystrategien din får deg til å gråte, don't worry, just cry out loud.